You're listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast, discussing all aspects of precision and long-range rifle shooting. This episode is brought to you by Impact Dynamics. And now, over to your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to the Precision Shooting Podcast. My name is Rusty and this is episode number 121. Joining us tonight for this special episode is Dutchy sitting across from me. How are you, mate?
I am I'm not Russian. I'm just chilling.
You trying to get me to play the song, are you?
Maybe.
Good. Well, now that you're chilling, Bronte, how are you, mate?
Yeah, well, thanks, and yourself, Rusty?
Excellent, mate. Excellent. We missed you last time around.
Yes.
But here you are, back again
back
to
in
make
the
up for
flesh.
it. Wonderful. And joining us tonight, now, this gentleman has appeared before, but Paul Waning, how are you, mate?
Good, Rusty. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for jumping on board. We're talking about some topics that are very close to your heart tonight, to some degree. All right. Well, anyone been shooting? Anything exciting to report in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I went shooting on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
So
Where'd you go?
just down to the spot down near Mymponga there. So quite a few good long-range opportunities there. So it was a bit of fun. So
On game or targets?
a
or
bit of both.
Yeah.
Bit of both. So I got targets out to a bit past, I think, 1450.
Nice.
So it was a bit of fun.
Brilliant.
And then soft targets at some, reasonable distances as well.
Yeah, cool. No, good stuff, mate. Paul, any shooting? No?
This weekend, mate. I've
This
been for
weekend.
3 months.
Yeah.
So it's coming. It's going to be messy.
Good. Yeah, we are going shooting this weekend. The club match on this weekend, which should be good fun. I'm meant to be the match director for the centre fire, and then I'm meant to be very slowly shooting parts of the rim fire match on the Sunday.
Yeah, right. Any tips for the Cinefire match?
Yeah, hit the targets, mate. Hit the targets.
Yeah, I might have to work on that one then.
We're dropping the bombs tonight. It's good. So the weekend just gone was the Night Force Heatstroke. Now I fortunately couldn't travel, so I couldn't get up there. Did you guys see any of the Facebook posts or photos or anything from that? No, I didn't pay much attention. Too busy shooting, I guess, Bronte. Yeah, I was basically at home crying. This is the first PRS I've missed in Australia, so it was an emotional weekend for me.
Call yourself a director.
No, not really. Very rarely. But anyway, only if I have to.
Don't you have some sort of like cutout thing that says match director on it?
Maybe. I don't know. Do you looking around? Oh, yeah, for particular matches. Yeah.
Yeah, so you do call yourself a director. You've got things in your
not for the
room
heat-
saying, yeah, I am match director.
Not for the
refer
Heatstroke
to
Open.
my
please see my trophy.
Yeah.
Not for the Heatstroke Open, I have not. That's left in the capable hands of Butters, who by all accounts ran a very good and interesting course of fire, which is good. So that went well. Congratulations to Luke for winning that one. That's 3 from 4 this year. And also to Andy McNeil, who came second, which I think his first podium this year. Yeah, and
maybe it was Pete.
Ash was third. Oh. Yeah. I'm thinking I spent more time looking at the series results. Because I did them straight after the match while they were they're probably still having some drinks at the club. So I was paying attention to the series results, and that's right. Ash was third in overall, and the series is looking interesting because Andy ended up into third in the series, with Butters in fourth. So it's getting interesting. There's 2 matches left, and the next match, which is the Ignition Custom Winter Classic, went up for sale for the members. And was full in 80 minutes.
That's pretty quick.
Is ridiculous.
That's
That's real quick.
That's a bucking, isn't it?
Sorry?
That's going to be – is it a bucking, that one?
Yeah, bucking. Yeah. That's 80 minutes. The closest, the fastest that's ever sold before, which was the bucking event the year previous, was about 10 hours. Which is still really quick.
There's a few less shooters at that event.
Yeah, that's
there?
right. And that's the reason for it. It's Victorian match, and the Victorian match is obviously sort of where the majority of shooters now are, because that's where the history of the PRS has really sort of kicked off, and so that's fairly heavy with the PRS shooters there, and only 42 into that match. So, it didn't make its public release, and it barely made its members release. So, hopefully we've got one more match, I guess, available for the rest of the year, which is the Battle of Biggin from Huntsman Oz. So that is probably one to jump into if you are thinking about it, particularly if you're up in Queensland, because this will be the first time we've done it in Queensland. So it's good to see it get up over there. We have our own match for our club, which is the Steel Slam that's happening in September. So I'm guessing some of you guys are going to shoot that.
Won't be shooting. I think I'll be probably ROing again.
Well, all the ROs are shooters this time around, so that means you're shooting, I guess.
Oh, good luck.
That's right. You can keep me company at the bottom pool.
I don't know, Bronte. You do it right, mate. You do it right. As long as your gun doesn't break down, you generally do not
As
too
I said,
bad.
I'll keep me company down at the bottom because it's guaranteed to break down.
Well, this is a 1-day match, so a little bit different. This is like, we normally run like a 6-stage sort of half day or a couple of hours really, low key. This is going to be a 9-stage sort of fairly, sort of between a PRS match and a general club match. So a really good stepping stone for those guys who are looking to shoot the bigger matches but are not perhaps experienced and want to get some of that intimidation out of the way. It's going to be a good opportunity to do it. Cash prizes,
Nice.
which is something we don't see too often. So that will be good fun. I've got some ideas for some of those stages. There should be some really interesting, unique sort of stuff that we haven't seen at too many matches before, for a couple of them at least. The other thing with that match is actually going to kick off the State of Origin rivalry between SA and Victoria. Bronte's just perked up. This is something we've been talking about for a little while, actually, probably almost since we got wind that might be something happening in Victoria. And so the idea behind that is that the match will run as an individual match and it'll be just as it normally would. But then the top probably 4 from SA and the top 4 from Victoria, those scores will be tallied, and then the trophy will go to whichever of the clubs has won that particular match, with then the intention that next year Victoria and SA will host a match each, and we'll see whether that trophy moves over the course of the year or remains in whatever state it started in. So just to add another little dimension, that won't be the focus of the match. So, one of those things, if you're in Adelaide and you want to get along to shoot it, because unless you do really well, your score won't affect the State of Origin side of things. And if it does affect it, well, happy days. It's either really good or there wasn't very many great shooters, depending on your skill level, really.
Greatness is a relative.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the Steel Slam at Practical Shooting SA, which is our home club at Monardo. That's on the 14th of September. So interstaters, even if you're not from Victoria, you're welcome. In fact, if you're from Victoria, you're not really welcome.
So how does that work though? Can we have ring-ins? Like, there's a few guys in Queensland that we know can shoot. There's there's one guy in Darwin that sort of shoots.
That one guy in Darwin should be banned.
Mostly for his hair. So clarity around that. I believe there hasn't been the firm rule locked in yet, but it's going to be something along the lines of where your firearms license is, the state of your firearms being registered to. Either that or to go on the birth certificates. And, who knows who was born where. We'll start pulling all those details out.
There'll be some controversy. Dual citizenships.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Bring back the politics days.
Could you be born in 2 states?
What if you were born in the dead centre of the River Murray?
What if you want...
Which part?
Between Victoria and... I was at the Darling. Between Victoria and New South Wales, for example.
I think you probably got other complications in life than a shooting match if you're born inside a river, in the dead centre of a river.
They do have things called boats.
Yeah.
On top
you
of
said
it.
in the river, though.
No, water birth.
In the Murray. That's
not a water birth.
We use the term water loosely when we describe the Murray.
That's not a water birth. That's a water accident.
Wow.
All
Once
right.
again, it's all relative.
So good. We'll move on from that. Something around firearms license, most likely. So anyway, get along to it. Should be really good fun. And I think a few of us will be there. Andy's definitely shooting it, I believe. So we'll be able to give him some
One easy beat.
Yep. And Dutchy's shooting it. So that's 2. All right.
It's never lonely at the bottom.
That's right.
We're pretty crowded at that bottom end.
It's a race to the bottom. It's like golf. Lowest score wins, eh? We could go with that. Good. So, actually, that'd be an interesting concept. We just count the misses.
I'm actually thinking I'd probably win.
Yeah, I thought I was like, I'm in for a shot on this one. Yeah, geez.
I don't think you're too keen to dismiss that idea. Actually.
All I got to do is have enough rounds to come out in the end.
So I'm just thinking that the actual optimum rifle choice for that would be something like a pump action with a large magazine capacity, because then you can get those rounds off really quickly.
In 22.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, 30 round tube mag or something. Probably
That
don't even
sounds
allowed to
good.
have those anymore.
Probably not. No, definitely not. Maybe. We'll see. All right. So, last episodes, we announced a bit of a special on some M31 Earmor earmuffs, and through to some technical complications, the discount codes didn't work, which is disappointing because it was meant to end today, the time of recording. So we've thrown an extra month onto it, and thanks to Andrew Sargent who let me know about that. Those codes now do work, and he has put through an order making sure they did work. And so the code EARLESS, thanks to Dutchy, I think he came up with that one. Does now, he doesn't remember what happened yesterday. So that now will take $10 off the Earmor M31 earmuffs from Scoped Out or Projectile Warehouse. So go and check that out. For those who are on Facebook, which is not everyone in the room, but for those who are silly enough to sign up and sign all their privacy away, on Facebook, we have started a new group on Facebook, which is the Precision Rifle Australia. I don't know if you guys have seen that at all or checked it out, but anyway, the idea came because there's plenty of good groups on Facebook, and there's plenty of other groups on Facebook as well. And the PRS members have a Facebook page, which is locked down. You have to be a member to get in. And the reason for that is because, the passwords for early entry and all those sort of details are put up there. And it's, there's that ability to be able to share stuff within the members about, going to matches and accommodation, all bits and pieces that are reasons that is locked down. But we usually probably get 2, 3, maybe 4 people a day trying to join the group, which is wonderful because it shows that there's a real significant interest in the sport. And I hate the idea of knocking all those guys back, but of course it has to exist for a particular purpose. We got the same with the club. We've got a members group for the club, and you can talk about the meetings and the committee meetings and all those sort of the boring mundane things, but really only gets extended to that. So after actually taking a few requests, some guys like, oh, what group should I join to ask questions about this stuff? You're like, I'm not sure. No. Well, I guess we'll rally up a few guys and start one. So we did. So Precision Rifle Australia is on Facebook. So jump in there, and there's a bunch of top level comp shooters in there from Australia and also from around the world. And so, and it's fairly closely watched as well. So the information that you should receive on that page is fairly monitored. With some posts and bits and pieces being removed or challenged or whatever, just to keep the content appropriate. So you don't ask the question of what gun should I buy, and then get all the responses that are from people who haven't been in the situation they plan to use that gun in. If you're asking what gun should I buy for this type of competition, you want the people who shoot that competition to advise it to you, not people who have watched that competition. And so that's where, it's fairly closely monitored. But the offset of that is that the information you get should be fairly good. So, and particularly from some of the guys it comes from, they know because they've been there and done it. So anyway, I thought I'd mention that to our listeners as well. So jump on in there and say you heard it, because you have to say how you found out about the group. So say it was a podcast, and we'll definitely reject you. Let you in for sure.
I thought that was a huge introduction for the stonecutters.
It was. That's the next part.
I'm like, who rigs every Oscar night? We do.
Black dog, we have a wiener.
Good job. I've got to drop a Simpsons reference in there
every
for each
time.
episode. That's good. Brilliant. All right. Dutchy, how's your stock project going, mate? Any updates on that? Cutting the cheek piece out was your last one.
Yeah, that hasn't progressed any further, but I did re-blue the barrel in action.
Oh, we're getting closer then.
Yes, we are.
What'd you use to re-blue it?
What was that? Birchwood Casey? Is that the name?
Yep.
Yeah, something like
Is
that.
it
What-
it's a cold blue? Like you paint it on cold? Or
yeah, the
Paste
the
or
paste.
the
Yeah,
paste,
use the
yeah,
paste
probably.
in it.
Yep.
The instructions were very limited. I felt like it wasn't working for the first few applications,
Right.
and then it started colour started to come out. I'm like, well, didn't say it would take this long.
Also, it probably didn't say it wouldn't.
It also didn't say it wouldn't, so I just kept going, and it looks quite nice actually.
Oh,
It's come up a treat.
lovely.
Good. No, well, that's what you want. That's
But yeah, having never blued a rifle before, I thought maybe one application I'd start to see some colour.
That's not an unreasonable expectation.
Yeah, and there was like very little. There's more discoloration, I'd say.
Yeah, okay.
And then by fourth or fifth application of it's come up really nice.
Yeah,
I'm
nice.
very happy with it. So yeah, that's what I'd been doing on that
Get it
project.
Yeah,
and what else did I do? There was something else. I've been modifying the magazines so that they feed properly because I've got 2 aftermarket magazines for a 50-year-old rifle, and they don't quite feed because they sit too low.
Yep.
So I've been messing around with the.
Just remind our listeners what gun it is.
It's
It's for those who've just joined us, they'll be like, what is he talking about?
it's a Krico 22, which is a company that's actually called Kriegskourt & Co. Stuttgart, made in Germany.
Okay.
It's about 50 years old, the rifle, and it does shoot very accurately, but it had some crimes against gunsmithing committed against it, and I'm seeking to rectify that. So I'm a fair way into the project, and yeah, just sort of finishing up a lot of the cosmetic things at the moment. But yeah, like I mentioned a few episodes ago, I have made an attempt at putting an adjustable cheek piece on. Haven't really progressed any further with that, but we're getting there.
Okay. Good. Well, YouTube channel is keeping me updated. So our YouTube channel is actually in line with our actual podcast stream, which is nice to have. So if you are listening to us on YouTube, welcome aboard. We actually are growing a little collection of followers on there as well. I did actually have a question on one of the from not on YouTube but on one of the podcast apps. Asking that if we removed the laughter out of our episodes, how long the actual content would be of an hour episode. I estimated about 3 minutes 20. Seems about right.
Probably a bit conservative.
Conservative, yeah, 250 or something. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe one day we should release like the express version of the episode and then the actual version. The express is just the information that's useful. Won't take long to edit that.
You mean just the intro?
All aspects, mate.
Yeah, I was just thinking all aspects.
Good. Brilliant. Well, tonight's main topic is one we get asked a huge amount, and it's one that there is lots of information about, not all of it right, not all of it wrong, and sometimes hard to decipher. So we're going to give it our best go. Now, one of the reasons that we have Paul particularly in here is Paul was actually the founder of Scoped Out. So he has spent many years knowing scopes, selling scopes, talking about scopes, and so it's good to have him along. Dutchy built scopes for a while, and Bronte breaks scopes. So we figured between the four of us, not good with numbers, we can probably come together with a few answers on a few things. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to break up into section 1 is going to be about sort of clarification of some parts of scopes. So maybe there's a few scopes behind you, Dutchy, but we'll look through all the different elements and you know some of the things, you know, what a objective is and MRAD or MIA and all these sort of things. But talk about them in terms of what they do, and then we'll get into section 2, which is actually answering the question that everyone asks: is what scope do I buy? Because that's very confusing. There are a lot of scopes, there's a lot of numbers, and there's lots of different meanings to what different things do, and that's going to come down there. And then if we get the chance, we're also going to bust into a few of the myths about scopes that are all magical and mostly wrong. So we shall open the account on scopes. How about we kick off with MRAD or MOA, Bronte? Do you want to tackle part of that? What is the difference there, and what are we talking about in those things?
Well, they're basically just angular units of measurement.
Mm.
Yeah,
Summed it up. Move on. All right.
pretty much.
Yep. So what are we doing with angular units of measurements?
One breaks a degree into, I think it's a 60th of a 60th for MOA.
Yep.
Oh, there's 60 MOA in a degree.
Okay, so it's yep.
So
And then whereas your MRAD is breaking down a radian. So a radian is, I guess it's a mathematical
equation
that's relative to, there's two pi radians in a full revolution.
Yep.
And then it's basically breaking that down further. So I guess one of the myths we'll probably touch on later, that there's a whole, one's metric, one's imperial. It's all not true.
That is correct. But it is, some people find that useful as a reference to understand the variation where one lines up with a metric denomination in terms of division.
Fits quite well, yes.
Yeah, in terms of MRAD. But MOA doesn't fit directly with the imperial system. But it is closer to the imperial system in terms of a measurement. And so that's where that sort of thought does. I mean, we can bust some myths now. It's all right. We're not on a particular schedule. But the two questions are asked is MOA or MRAD. We'll get into the applications of both of those, but they're two different measurement systems to achieve the same goal, really. First focal plane or second focal plane are often referenced as FFP or SFP. Anyone want to go over that one? Paul, may as well.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that just basically means that on your second focal plane, your reticle basically stays the same at any zoom range, and the first focal plane will change with your zoom rotation. So if you go on high magnification, your reticle will appear very large. And obviously, when you wind it back out, the reticle will be very, very small. However, at each time, the increments on the reticle are always constant. So you can, whatever you're reading is true at any range. Whereas a second focal plane, you have to, we'll call it a sweet spot, which means the reticle is consistent at a particular range. On a 22 power scope, it might be at 22 power.
Yep.
And then if you're at, say, 11 power, you've got to do the adjustments to suit. So.
And so, yeah, because you said that the second focal plane doesn't change, but it doesn't appear to change in terms of visually. It looks the same as you go through magnification. But, yeah, those hash marks are different meanings on second focal plane. And that's where people running them on high power or in their maximum power or whatever their sweet spot is, it's no big deal. But as soon as you start changing off that, you've got an extra calculation to work out what that one line to the next line was 0.1 of a mil or 0.2 of a mil. And now it's something different. The factor of the magnification changed. So second focal plane, first focal plane, we'll talk about application of those as well, but that's basically what happens. And it relates to, I mean, Dutchy, you know this well, but it depends where the reticle is physically located in the scope.
That is correct.
Yeah, whether or not it's in front or behind magnification.
Yep.
Good.
Care to elaborate on that? No.
Turns out no.
Yeah. No, it's technically it's to do with where the reticle's sitting in terms of the erector. If it's either in front, like closer to the eyepiece, that's a second focal plane. So your magnification changes aren't going through the reticle. The image of the reticle's before that, and then if it's in the first focal plane, it's after the erector. So any change of magnification will affect the apparent size of the reticle image.
And so speaking of the erector, that's on to the next point is the internal adjustment, which also plays as a trade-off often to magnification. But let's talk internal adjustment in terms of the erector. What is that actually doing?
When you're using your power change, the distance between the lenses inside the erector is changing. So your the way the light is coming through is I say light, but I mean image. The way the image is coming through, as well as light, is changing when you're changing the power change as these two lenses, or there might be a series of lenses. The distance between them is changing.
Yep. And then I guess in most current scopes is your erector is also the part that moves around as you adjust your turrets. So as you adjust your adjustment, it moves that erector around.
Yes, that is correct. There's usually a spring that holds like a pre-tension on the erector assembly, and as you move your turrets, the springs forcing the erector to move, however many mils or MOA or clicks or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
You adjust on the turret, so that's one of the internal adjustments. There's a few more as far as parallax adjustment, and if you've got an adjustable ejective as well, that's where some of the other moving parts you can encounter inside scopes, but a lot of modern scopes use the side focus or parallax adjustment elsewhere. It's a lot of the older technology that's at the front.
Gotcha. And so that's often done as an offset to magnification. So how much adjustment you have, often the higher magnification scopes in the equivalent sort of range have less adjustment internally as they go up in magnification.
Well, that also relates to body tube size as well, like how much physical space there is inside. Can also affect your overall travel on your turrets.
So a higher magnification, that generally have a larger erector, therefore it can't move as far?
Not necessarily.
Or does it just not, because it's zoomed in so far, it would start hitting this, like in terms of the vision would start hitting the side of the scope? Yes.
It also relates with the relationship between the magnification and how much room you've got on your turret to actually move that erector to match the measurement you're trying to move to.
Okay.
In very, very simple term, like I'm thinking in terms of like, well, the pitch of the thread is different, so it's moving the erector either more or less each click, because your click value will be standard across a lot of models, but the actual internal movement will be different, and that relates to the thread pitch of the turret with how much it's physically moving each turn, and that is lower in the higher magnification.
Okay.
Like there's just less room at higher magnification relative to the actual physical length of the scope.
Yep.
Does the sort of is there any direct correlation between the length of the erector tube inside and the zoom range on the scope? You know, if you've got a scope, for example, the good old classic 3 to 9 that have a 3 times magnification zoom factor from your maximum to your greatest versus, you know, some of your newer ones which are, you know, 5, 6 times isn't uncommon.
Yep.
I don't actually know. I don't know, to be honest.
You can say it, I know.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Nothing wrong with that.
Because I'm just thinking, if essentially, well, I mean, it's been a while since I studied lenses, but it's all about essentially distance between lenses changing, yeah?
Yes,
So if
effectively.
the
This is
to get a greater zoom range, you need to make those lenses move further closer apart, which means that bit that they move in needs to be longer, which is then also going to limit.
But
how
the
far
shape
that thing
and
can,
diameter of the lens will also change the image coming through.
Okay.
yes,
So
true.
how that is being transferred, so they can get because like more modern scopes have higher magnification in a shorter scope body.
And that's the shape of the lens that affects that, doesn't it?
Yes, I would say so. I'm not
Yeah,
100% going to say yes or no.
Well,
but
things have moved on since you've done it, haven't they?
they have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so magnification is another big question that, you know, a lot of people sort of track down, and they always think that more magnification for the longer ranges are always important. But and we'll get into some of the reasons as to why. But when we see sort of factors in magnification, Bronte, you bring up like a 3 to 9 has a 3 factor, and now you're talking about scopes that'll do from 4 to 32, and an 8 factor of magnification. They're harder to make, which is why we haven't seen them earlier, and talked about perhaps the lens shapes as being part of that, and that technology has certainly moved on.
So when you're talking magnification, I mean, are you suggesting that, you know, going up to like the 35 powers nowadays or the 32s? All right. So I guess from a seller's and a buyer's perspective or a user's perspective, the biggest thing that I've always found that magnification affects your field of view. That's the first thing you got to look at.
It's a trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah, and it also affects your eye box. Now, the more magnification you have, the harder it is to get a nice constant picture. You'll be messing around with your cheek weld, and if you don't have a good cheek weld, which I'm sure we're going to get into later, you could be fluffing around so much that, you know, if you are hunting, you lose that ability to take that shot. You know, and then because you're at high magnification, you've got a bad field of view, so you can't chase it because you've lost it. So there's a big trade-off, and I think that's where, you know, some people think, oh, I'm shooting long range, I need a lot of magnification. It's not the case. Yeah. You know, I mean, we've had instances at Kai where we're shooting at a mile and I was at 15 power. Yep. You know what I mean? And you would think that was a static target. Yet I had to go to 15 power, A, to see it clearly, and B, so I could use a reticle for part of the shot. So it really is a fallacy that you need magnification. You know, the target shooters, they love it. The F-class guys, you know.
But they're also geared up around that as well. They're set to. They're not necessarily dialing back to 100, and they're really geared on that particular thing. And they're also on a very set range with wind flags and other factors that they don't necessarily need to see through the scope. They can see it in other ways.
But I guess Paul touched on another really valid point that you know, there's often a correlation between higher magnification and poorer image quality. You know, you start with your lower magnification, it's easier from a scope manufacturers and imperfection of lenses and all these lovely things to get a really nice clear picture at, say, 15 power.
Yep.
But if you want a really, really nice clear picture at, you know, 60 power, it's a heck of a lot harder to manufacture that and the cost. And even with some relatively high-end scopes, I looked at the other day, on Sunday, you know, at 25 to 30 power, it's, you know, great. You start pushing beyond that and it starts to degrade.
Yeah, absolutely. And you certainly see that. You see that on the cheaper scopes, and ask that question a bit. You know, guys pay $400 for a decent scope, and they say, oh, it's an 18 power scope, and once they hit like 15, it starts getting a little bit milky. That's part of it.
Even on really high end optics, they struggle with the light transmission on the really high power, and your image can dull off, which gives the appearance of milkiness or like a clouded image, but it's also related to how much light is actually passing through, and the image degrades with the lower amount of light. It's not all.
It's not all of it.
Yeah, that's not all of it. There's many factors in there, and like lens quality is one of them, and then like the coatings as well, what colors they're picking up. Also contribute to it, but a lot of the problem arises on high power from like lack of light, and the image darkens and becomes you have distortion. That's on like, you know, 50, 60 power scopes where they're, you know, the Paul mentioned it before, your eye box, you're struggling to find that sweet spot to see the image because the image being transferred to you is so much smaller. And you know, they're all relate to each other, and that's another problem, like getting enough light, and it's made worse shooting dawn dusk, and if you're spotlighting as well. I don't know if that really applies to this discussion, but you know, if you're
all aspects, mate,
all aspects. So
which probably almost connects into the objective size, because there's I don't know whether it's a myth or there's definitely some discussions and opinions regarding what the right size objective is.
And there's correlations between that and magnification and your exit pupil, your eyeballs.
Yeah, I think just back on the magnification, Dutchy raised a good point, because depending on the quality of the internals, you can actually twist your lenses inadvertently as well, which it impacts on your, obviously, the image that you're receiving, and it's the interpretation of your eye. And any kind, when you start magnifying that much, any small error along the way is, you know, excuse the pun, it's magnified. You know, obviously, it obviously makes it worse, because I mean, you're looking at an image that can be distorted, or readily distorted, I should say.
Definitely.
And to follow on further of what Paul was just saying, when you're using your scope for long range shooting, the best image is when the scope is optically centered. So when the all the lenses are lining up through the middle and the image is coming through the center of the objective. So when you're starting to go, if you've zeroed it and you're right down with your elevation, so you can take those longer shots, you will have a lower quality image because the image isn't going through the center of the lenses. So there is just so many factors that can contribute to a poor image or image shadow when you really start testing optics, and that's where even high-end optics can fail when they're offering more than they can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to say it's an optical law, but like
it's give and take. I mean, you've got to sacrifice something. So I mean, and expanding on what Bronte was sort of suggesting again, I mean, yes, objective size does have something to play into it because it lets more light in. More light is a benefit because obviously a clearer picture. Something's got to give though, and a higher magnification again, you lose the ability to have a higher amount of adjustment in your scope, which then means that if you're shooting long range and you're anticipating using that, high power scope, you might be, let's say for argument's sake, running a 30 MAO rail on a 308 and you'll run out of elevation quicker with the higher power scope.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Dutchy, you mentioned lens coatings in there and sort of picking colours and stuff like that. Lens coating is something that many people don't even realise happens. They just think there's glass in there. What's lens coatings?
I don't know specifically what they're made from. I don't think that was the question you were asking.
It's certainly not the question.
No, okay.
Just what their application.
Very briefly, I think it's it will, like when they advertise it's a certain type of lens coating, it will affect the what do they call it? Like the spectrum of colours that come through. So it might pick up more colour from what are your three primary? Red, yellow, blue, and
red, green.
It's green.
Blue. Yep.
Yes. Anyway, it'll pick up more.
He's more of an artist. He likes to paint, so yellow's more important.
Yeah, well, that's the addition versus subtraction of primary colours.
Of course, all aspects, Bronte. All aspects.
He's got a high vis shirt on. I don't know. Just feeling unsafe.
He's spot on, but yeah,
the coating will affect what colour will be transmitted more. So an image might seem richer in colour.
Yep.
Compared to an optic with a different coating or no coating. And I believe I'm happy to be corrected, but I believe it relates to not so much the image itself, but how the colour of the image comes through. So your greens might seem more vibrant with a higher end coating, and they determine that by whatever purpose the scope's going to be used. So if it's going to be used in hunting scenario, I guess they want to be able to distinguish game from background. And at some level of the design, it's been determined that whatever
particular colour is more favourable in a particular scenario. The gross generalisation I've heard and sort of seen is that many of the European optics, which often have that bent towards sort of hunting, dusk and dawn sort of stuff, often will favour blues, and so they pop more, particularly in dusk and dawn, whereas many of the American optics are much more natural in their colour selection.
Much more free.
Yeah, much more freedom.
Yeah,
much more freedom.
They pick up freedom easily.
Seed freedom.
Yeah. Well, for sowing freedom seeds, you need. Yeah.
That's exactly right. But they favour that more natural colour, so they don't pop one colour more than another. Now, that's a gross generalisation and won't be true for all optics or all brands or all locations, but that's just certainly a perception that has been held, and I've seen that across those sort of different country origins. Not to say one can't do the other by any stretch of the imagination, because they certainly can.
It also gets down to your interpretation, like what your eye interprets as a good colour, a contrasting colour. And then you've got the brand interpretation. Some people think one brand is better than the other.
Yeah, really?
Which has nothing to do with what it looks like. So,
well, even on that further, your own eyes will see colours differently. Your right eye and your left eye will see colours differently.
Yeah, okay.
So there's that point you brought up about interpretation is,
Huge, yeah.
it's huge. And I suppose that comes down to if you like something, the way something looks, then that scope is right for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I've just made a gross generalisation about country of origin, but that also doesn't play into it because many the machines that make these things can be put anywhere in the world and still make to whatever quality they're set to.
Yeah, it's about what the coatings are made of, though. 'Cause the different elements that they use in them. But the other aspect of, I guess, the coatings we haven't really touched on is the other benefits from like an anti-fogging. They also provide a bit of a harder shell, so the lens is less likely to scratch.
Yes.
And some of those other aspects of coatings that are
absolutely
worthy of consideration depending on your application.
Yeah, definitely.
I think you'd find differences in image between the same scope, same model from different, just like one compared to the other, even if it was exactly the same from the same manufacturer, just from the process of manufacturing and the amount
variance.
of slight variance. You would see some.
Oh, what scope to scope you're talking?
Yes.
Yeah, I've noticed that because I've had a particular scope, but everybody else's looks great and mine looked awful.
That's the Bronte factor. That's
Yeah,
not
I
the
just
scope.
assumed it was
What-
me because I thought I must
What
have broke
did you
it somehow.
do? Yeah.
But I swear
This
I
thing
only
doesn't
just took it out
clean
of the box.
with gravel very
Yeah,
well.
sandpaper didn't polish shit up at all.
Oh, maybe I have to use something a bit finer than 60 grit.
That'll do it. We've covered off on some stuff about lenses and such.
Before you jump off lenses,
I'm not jumping off.
I've got a bit of a theory there.
Oh, go for it. I'm going to grab one of those drinks.
So with that, with the European sort of flavour that you were talking about before, they never used to be top end, as in magnification. They were always low power. So maybe that had more to do with it because we'll call them, the non-European scopes or manufacturers were probably at a higher, at a higher zoom, like more of the 20 than 25 power.
Okay.
Whereas the Europeans were still, they were very predominantly, first focal plane, super clear.
Yep.
But then, they'd max out at 12 power. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's a lot about the application because from a European, a lot of theirs are hunting-based scopes where, and also with their laws over there you can't use a spotlight.
Oh,
So
I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Depending on the country.
They
Depending
have-
on the country.
yeah.
What I'm getting at though is they have had to
that's
aim at
the
that
origin.
market. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah,
That's why they're
absolutely.
good at it.
Yeah.
And whereas the non-European,
Other.
yeah, have gone to their different flavour, I guess,
Sure.
or a different end of the market.
Yeah. It's probably very appropriate. Turret styles. So we commonly get people will reference the two styles of turrets as hunting and target, perhaps otherwise known as exposed or capped. Any other words for those styles of turrets?
Oh, tactical normally gets thrown
Tactical,
around in there. 'Cause
yeah.
that's cool.
And so I guess what you cover that off really with many turrets are capped off, and you have to take something off to then go in and adjust it. And that's the guns I grew up with, and probably very similar for you guys, where you never touch the scope on your gun. That certainly was a rule for me. You would never touch that scope.
Zero,
It's-
and that's
it's
what you
zeroed
don't
and
touch
that's
it.
Or it's shooting slightly right and slightly high, and so you just aim a little bit low and a little bit left, and that's just don't ever touch Dad's guns in terms of the scopes, because it was a black magic art, and no one knew how to actually zero a gun, and certainly that's what I grew up with and grew around, and as I got to know guns and scopes better, I went, "Now stuff that for a joke. These are easy to, you can actually you can make this work. Like you can point it at that and actually hit that by adjusting your scope." But so a lot of guys go for hunting turrets because they don't want to touch them, and a lot of guys go for target turrets because that's all what they want to do. They want to twiddle their knobs, and I guess strictly speaking, you can certainly hunt with a target-orientated scope and vice versa. But Bronte, give us a little bit more on those two types of scenarios, and why you probably will call all your scopes hunting.
Well, yeah. I don't discriminate against the roles that each of my firearms. They're all get used.
You're an equal opportunity shooter.
Absolutely, it's whatever I've got ammo for gets used. That's normally the deciding factor.
Sure.
the target style as we're referring to, the only gripe that often gets slandered, laid upon them is that, if you bump the turret while you're in the car or something like that, you'll, lose your zero and you'll miss and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Windage maybe, but I can't say I've ever had that happen to me. And if it does, it's not hard to check. They've got these little numbers on there that you line up and you're all good again.
Paul, you got any other sort of benefits for the hunting style? I mean, let's call them capped and exposed because that's really all they are, the difference between them.
Yeah, I think I'm a fan of capped windage turrets anyway as a standard, even if I had exposed turrets.
Oh, he's taken the combination out.
Yeah, the reasoning behind that is because your wind isn't constant and, your elevation sort of would be in that instance. So you should be really adjusting what you know. Hence, the windage can be capped.
Yeah, if I had to pick one to be capped, no-brainer, you cap the windage. But then
Bronte's going to hit me up and saying, but what about your different reticles? Because you haven't got a reticle that helps with a capped turret, then you're stuffed.
Well, not even that. But what about when you're shooting extended ranges and
you want a baseline.
You want to say that wind is, you're looking at a 5 mil wind hold. Mm-hmm. It's a shitload easier to dial on, say, 4.5 mils or 5 mils,
and play with that,
and then play with that 1 mil.
Yeah, but if you're
either way,
I'll go into Paul's defense here.
Get a locking windage turret.
Yeah, if you're going to
requires a button or something to be pressed before you can move it.
No objection to that, but that ability to, I still muck around with my windage turret on a semi-regular basis. The elevation gets used all the time.
Yep.
Windage gets used.
We've jumped ahead a little bit. So to bring it up, so you're talking about it's generally an exposed turret, and then the windage turret is usually somewhat of a very dialable turret that's got a cap on it as well. Yep. And so usually in that scenario, I'm guessing you've probably got plenty of time to make that shot because 5 mil of wind, you're taking plenty of time to make that shot.
Yeah.
So you would be able to take the cap off and adjust and and play with it and then put it back on when you're done. But I guess the exposed turrets certainly do run that risk of being bumped. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it. But there are variants that will lock. So you may have to pull the turret up and that will unlock and push that turret down and that'll lock it and therefore it can't be bumped. So again, there's different variations within those types of exposed or capped turrets. One of the benefits of capped turrets, particularly sort of lower profile, is if you're trying to build a lighter weight gun and it's low profile, it's not going to snag on stuff. Whereas a lot of the exposed turrets are larger and increased in size and more inclined to knock and bump and bits and pieces like that.
It does relate to its intended purpose.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe when we started, we were talking about hunting.
Hunting
and a cap turret,
fine.
Cap windage on a hunting rifle it's
fine.
Makes a lot of sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
because I know you said you've never had a hunting trip ruined by a wandering turret, but I've had one go astray and then brought it back to camp, re-zeroed it and had it go astray, and it was by 20 odd clicks. So we're talking
almost a full revolution.
Over a full revolution.
Yeah,
that's why I couldn't bring it back out in the field. We had to come back to camp, re-zero it, and in the end I just chucked it in and used my backup rifle because it just kept moving.
And that's one thing that I think has probably changed in the scopes that we're using today versus scopes we probably grew up with. Back in the day, it was actually quite possible to do a complete revolution out. But all of my sort of better scopes that I've used, the windage, I think I've got 10 mils, 5 each way or whatever it is.
Yep.
And I can't actually go a full revolution out.
So you've got to stop on them.
None of them will go more than, I dial it all the way one way. I can't get to zero. Obviously, I need to go all the way back the other way to get to zero.
Yeah, and again, that'll probably be a higher power scope. Whereas if you've got a 12 power scope, you'll probably find that the internals will adjust a hell of a lot more than just 5 mils.
Yeah, and you will find that depending on the model of scope you're talking about, you can machine that tab off, and now you can get the full amount
further.
Of windage.
Yeah,
that
that's right. I mean, what my Steiner.
Not advising that, by the way.
Just
saying it's possible.
With a Steiner, I think it's got a lot more windage adjustment than it lets you access, and I think it's probably one of the better zero stops where you basically unscrew the rub screws, turn it to zero, and that's your zero stop set. And the same with the elevation turret, and that's I think you got 5.5 each way.
Yeah, well, just before we get on to zero stops, because that's the next point, but the hunting side of things, going back and remembering the guns that I was using back, Dad's guns, fair enough, not adjust, because the chances are that if I dialed that turret accordingly, probably wouldn't return to where it's meant to. It wouldn't track as well because it's probably a really cheap scope, and it's on a pretty cheap gun, and so the idea of the concept of not dialing your not adjusting your scope is sensible, particularly if you hadn't spent decent money on a scope, and it would wander. It would wander if you did start playing with it.
But also the distances that I know when I was younger, I wasn't shooting. It was 200-300 meters was a long shot back then. So a couple hundred meters, you I'll just aim about a foot above its head, and that'll be about right.
We should be good,
and we should be pretty sweet. We would at those distances. Being able to accurately dial was not perhaps quite as critical for most hunting applications.
Yeah, well, the increase in scopes and the ability to dial and do all those sort of things. Another problem was encountered, which you referenced before, and Dutchy references that you don't necessarily know which revolution you were on. So your ability to dial that dial around 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 times for some of the older real-world scopes is then when you wound back, you're having to count how many rotations you're doing, and then if you got distracted and then you left it and packed it away and pulled it out again, you had no idea where your zero was going. And so there was very many ways to deal with that, with lines underneath, so you'd know which line you were on, but then you'd have to remember which line you were on, which wasn't a super easy way to do it anyway. So the idea of a hard stop in there, so you could wind your scope back with some sort of mechanism that it would lock down at a 0 point that you designated.
Okay, so on that, so Schmidt and Bender brought out the PM2 like many, many years ago. I think probably even back in the 70s, and they had an exposed turret on it. It was only a single rotation turret. However, when you zeroed it, it was caliber specific essentially, and when you zeroed it, that was at 100 meters, and then the next one's 200 meters, 300 meters, 400 meters. That essentially gave you the zero stop of sorts. Obviously not,
precursors.
Yeah. I don't know anything before that. I just remember, when I was sort of dealing with scopes and whatnot, and I do remember sort of coming across, and I got very interested in, I guess, the military applications on things, and because it's really good to see how it evolved. You know what I mean? How they started off with a duplex reticle, and then they're all mil dots, and then running mil dots, which is mil radian, but then running MOA. Adjustments, which is a complete and utter no-no. Yeah.
Thanks, Marines.
Yeah. No, it's a complete and utter no-no now, yet, I remember, even up to 7 or 8 years ago, Schmidt and Bender were doing that. You'd buy a Schmidt and Bender scope and then you'd have 2 different adjustments on it.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what the hell? These guys are top end.
Not just up to 7 years ago, mate.
Yeah.
I think you can.
I saw a new one the other day that was like that.
Whoever invented it, whatever the name they go by, the concept of a zero stop or a hard stop has been a big sort of step forward to be able to just wind your scope back to zero. And what happened is a lot of that all come out with a zero stop, and then people would make it, well, you can dial two clicks under, then one you could dial 4 clicks under, and then scopes you could dial 5 or 6 or 7 clicks under for various reasons if you needed to. Say, for example, if a particular Northern Territory match director put in a 90-degree cant shot and you needed to offset your adjustment, could be useful. But, I mean, who would do that? Anyway, so and the other thing that sort of came along with them is Schmidt might have been one of the first ones to do this one, but that indicator to show that you're on the second revolution or third revolution of the scope was another real benefit, particularly if you were dialing up and down a fair bit. You got a giggle on, Paul?
I'm just thinking back, and I reckon that's when they went to the second turn in the turret.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the Schmidt scopes earlier on in the piece were
One
single rotation.
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all been caught by that.
Never.
Go? That's what that little thing sticking out the side means. Oops.
Well, I certainly remember it before that. We would the classic was we would be out long range shooting during the day,
I think go spotlighting. Yeah.
You do that, and then you go and have dinner and around the fire, and then you jump on the back of the ute to go spotlighting, and you were still dialed out for 800 metres. Yeah. Didn't go well on that Fox at 80, but yeah, so that's all right.
Definitely scared it though. It was worried.
Absolutely.
Jeez, what was that?
It was death.
I'm out of here.
It's gone. It's gone. So some of the other things that you find on scopes, I know Dutchy's alluded to it several times, is the parallax adjustment. Now that's either in a adjustable objective down the front on the bell of the scope on the objective end, and you adjust that. And what everyone thinks it does is brings it into focus, which is a sort of side benefit of parallax adjustment, but it removes a parallax error. Trying to explain parallax error on a podcast is probably beyond my capabilities.
I don't know. Come on, Dutchy. Give us some insight into the technical workings of how it actually achieves that. Because essentially what you're trying to do is get the two image planes to line up.
Yeah.
It corrects the lenses, I believe, to make the image join.
Because essentially, the issue parallax, the best way you describe it is you put one hand in front of the other.
Right in front of the microphone. Yeah, good.
From left to right.
Yes.
And when you lean sort of.
All right, so everyone listening at home, do this experiment. Put your hand up.
So you put two hands in front of your face,
right?
Like about say a foot away from your face, and
how can it be a foot if it's your hand? Never mind.
A foot away, a unit of measurement.
Okay, gotcha. I'm more of a metric guy.
You know, if you lean one way, so you lean to the right, keep your hands at the same place, lean to the right, you can see more of your backhand.
Yep.
Lean to the left.
Backhand.
But if those were on the same plane, so your hands move relative to each other.
to the left and you went to the right and I followed.
Oh, well, okay.
It's challenging.
So then, but they're on the same plane.
Yeah.
The image stays exactly the same relative no matter where you move your head.
And the two images we're worried about is what your target is and what your reticle's doing.
Correct.
And if you sit behind your scope and you wobble your head up and down a little bit, you'll see your reticle will bounce. Even if the image is in focus, that can happen. And so you use your adjustable objective or your parallax adjustment to bring those into sort of a false same focal plane to get rid of that movement. And that's where you can certainly, for guys who are not aware of that happening, or with fixed parallax scopes, which is always a giggle, what you will see is it's a really good way to improve your group size really quickly, because then you're actually shooting at the same point.
Yeah. When you go to the longer ranges, when you get essentially beyond that adjustment, I've found that was a huge difference between actually hitting absolutely nothing all day versus actually hitting something was to pull your head back and get that sort of equal scope shadow around the edge.
Yep.
And then essentially you use that. Stuff's like your cheek weld a bit, but you kind of have to accommodate it. But that made
big difference.
Your hit probability went up by 50% just purely based on actually aiming at the same spot, believe it or not.
So incredible. I mean, parallax is one of those ones that's hard to describe, and we've attempted it on a podcast, which is probably the least best mechanism to try it on, but we've given it a go. There are certainly some good videos around with parallax, and I'll try and link some stuff in the show notes that you guys can go and check out some interesting things on parallax. The other things that often aren't mentioned is the diopter, which is the closest part to your eye, and there's an adjustment in that. What many people think that is your focus, but it is not. Here's a Paul.
No.
What is it?
It's basically it's to focus. It is a focus, but it's to focus the reticle, not the image.
That's exactly.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of people, if you ever see someone on the range and they're looking through a scope and they're adjusting the diopter consistently,
Something's wrong.
Yeah, it should be a set and forget type thing, really. If you know how to set up a scope, or you know of someone that can do it, essentially the easiest way is to look at a very, very bland background. I think you max out your zoom and you adjust your parallax to infinity, I believe, if you've got a high power scope.
Yep.
And then you make the reticle as sharp as you can and as crisp as you can. Then you close your eyes for 2 seconds and open it up. And as soon as you open your eye, and you keep doing it for a couple of times. And what it should be is when you open your eye, it should be instantly sharp and crisp. And if it's not, it means because your eye's an amazing piece of kit in its own right, because it will
Love
it will adjust itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It changes shape. It's essentially to try and rectify the issue.
Yep. Get it in focus.
Correct. And that's it's just spend a bit of time. It might take you a couple of minutes.
It's worth it.
Oh, 100%. Because if you're playing with that diopter on the range, I'm the first one to sort of pull you up and say, guys, do you need a hand? And I might tell you how to do this. Yeah.
The problem with that focus on that is this. So if your reticle is out of focus, your eye, particularly with younger eyes or fresher eyes, will accommodate for it. But what's happening is it is not in focus, and then you're trying to focus your target downrange as well. So your eye is literally changing shape to look downrange and focus that, back to your reticle and focus that, downrange focus that. And you can see it if you have your reticle out of focus and then you look at your reticle, it'll go sharp. But downrange gets fuzzy. Look at downrange and it will do the reverse. What that is doing, you try to do that for a day. A couple of hours in, you'll probably have a headache in sort of more extreme examples. I've certainly been there. But if not, you have eye strain. Your eye is just sort of aching and it's not pleasant. Whereas if you get that diopter sorted out at the beginning of the day, you'll be able to be behind that gun for a fairly long time. So it's a big step to do it. And Paul, I think the way you suggested for the diopter is spot on. And what you are looking when you close your eye and you open it up is your eye will accommodate. So it'll go from fuzzy for like a split second if you've got good eyes to sharp. And you'll barely notice it, but if you're looking for it, you'll see it.
Yeah.
And you're trying to just remove that little time frame.
And when you start, especially in a hunting scenario, but when you start looking for targets, you don't want to be looking for your reticle. Your reticle's secondary. You want to be looking at the target, and you're not trying to focus on the reticle. Your reticle should always be in focus.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing. As soon as you've got that and you've actually worked it out and you've done it correctly, it's like a wow moment. You know what I mean? It's it'll improve your shooting for sure.
Yeah, well and truly.
Have you guys found some? I've got one scope that is very, very difficult to get that diopter set right, whereas other scopes, quite easy. That one particular scope, and it seems to be a fairly common thread with that make of scope.
Yep.
That getting that diopter is awfully finicky.
Okay.
It's got a locking ring on it, which is fantastic, because once it's set, you don't stuff around with it, and anyone that touches it shouldn't run away from my scope.
And which of your
I was going to
scopes
say,
is
what
one?
one's this one?
Hence
Now
why
that
I
it-
deliberately not said which one it was. But
call.
have you found that with a variation with difficulty in getting that set on certain scopes, or
Me
I've
personally,
seen
I've
that,
had
yeah.
one or two, and they're probably going to be different scopes to what you've had issues with. And I think it was just my eyes. Do you know what I
my
mean?
eyes are pretty shagged as well.
Yeah. And it could be something as simple as that. I mean, some diopters don't have the range of focus that you need.
Yeah.
And then obviously you get in the whole glass issues, and I mean, I wear glasses now, and I wear multifocals. That's a completely different ball game and problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you've got to take it on its own merit, I guess. But on a personal level, I've had issues with some scopes, but other people haven't on the same scope. So it's probably user error in your instance for sure.
It's probably just
I
broken.
won't rule that out.
It's probably just broken.
No, this is
it
the
could
only
be
scope that I
broken.
haven't been able to break.
So I've seen, because we used to run this on training courses, and this was one of the early things we would do over the course of a day or a week. And some guys would nail it real quick, and some guys would take quite a long time, and it would be like the tiniest little adjustments. So I think scopes can sort of be inherent to being much more fussy with it. But generally, those are the scopes that have a larger range of adjustment. And so like a quarter of a turn is too much.
Yep.
So a tenth of a turn is the adjustments you're looking for. Yeah. And so it can be a bit of a process. But as Paul said, if you need to take a couple minutes, but even 10 or 15,
20.
once you 20, once you lock it down,
Now it's set.
particularly with lock ring,
Perfect.
you're done and dusted, and don't ever let anyone change it.
The thing is, though, I mean, and it may even be something simple as don't do it yourself. Have someone else at the range so that you're not having to change your location and your eye and your position. You just close your eye and open it, and you get someone on the range to
adjust
Fiddle the knobs.
and then they can. Who's going to offer to play with your knobs? But anyway, let's not go there.
Right, move on. Good. Yeah, excellent. Now, one thing that got brought up before, which is often a cause of confusion, is a 20 MOA or a 30 MOA rail. And so we see this terminology bantered about, and those who know what it is will be very familiar with it. But a 20 MOA rail, Bronte, how is that useful?
It enables you to use more of your available travel by essentially putting a cant. So your scopes has a bias put in it originally.
Yep.
So instead of when you zero your scope, instead of that erector tube being essentially near to the zero of your available travel,
Yep.
it's towards the bottom of your available travel, which gives you more room to go up, basically.
Yep.
So you can, instead of having a scope, say, with 26 mil, that you burning 13 mil of that to get to zero, you now get yourself an extra 6 mil or 9 mil or whatever it is to play with.
Yeah.
So now you can, instead of being able to dial up 13 mil, you can now dial up 20 something.
Yeah. And one of the questions I often get asked is 20 MOA rail. Well, I need one for mil. Paul?
Look, I think the first point of contention on this will be, what are you doing? All right. So the one thing I always used to say to people is, exactly what is it used for? I mean, if you're going to shoot at 300 meters, you don't need a 20 MOA rail.
Yep.
If you want something you can grow into, by all means, that's something you need to look at.
Yep.
From what Dutchy was saying before, the sweet spot for the scope is obviously center of the erector tube.
Yep.
Now, it is worth noting that the 20 MOA rail, it brings you down slightly. However, some might choose to go to a 40 MOA rail and zero it at 150 to 200 meters rather than 100.
Yep.
And again, you don't want to be on the bottom of the erector tube, because if you bottom it out, and it's probably a good thing to do as a bit of a test, I guess, to see what it does, is you'll actually, when you've got your eye through there and you max out or you bottom out on your erector tube, you'll see the erecticle skew off really quickly.
Yeah.
Right at the end, and you'll be going, oh wow, what's going on here? My scope's broken. Well, no, you've just twisted the tube, and it's at its maximum adjustment or its minimum adjustment.
Yep.
You need to get off that and then put some positive tension back into it. So you can't go too low.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Dutch used to fix scopes, so he'd want you in the middle, I'm sure.
Yeah, but the thing is that if you're offsiding by, say, 20 MOA, and my question to you was, if someone's needing 20 MOA, they need a mil setup, and it's a 20 MOA rail.
You could just convert the MOA into mils. I mean, it's
just a candid rail.
It's not it's a constant. So it's not as if you've got to add it to your equation when you're working at your elevation.
Yep.
It's for the initial setup of the scope.
Yep.
It's
about 6 mil.
Yeah,
about.
six something.
But back onto the other one, if you're constantly shooting or often shooting further, if you drop 20 MOA or 6 mil, chances are a lot of your shots are going to be taken back towards the center point, because if you're shooting 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 meters, you're working much more in that center point. Otherwise, you probably, unless your name's Paul, you're probably not shooting 100 meters the whole time. So that would be.
It's only the start of the day. Come on.
Also, to further clarify on what I said before about image being worse it's near the extremities. So if your scope has a lot of travel and you put a 20 MOA rail on it, probably not going to notice any lower image quality.
Yep.
Where if you put a 40 on it and you're getting closer down to the limits of your travel, you may notice differences in your image.
Yeah.
But like a 20 MOA rail on a lot of modern scopes isn't using a lot of their travel. Probably won't see
all that
a loss of image quality. Whereas if you went a 40 or further and you're down around those extremities of travel on your turret, you probably are going to see a loss of image quality when you're at your zero.
Yeah, and that's one thing. So like if you use the example of a scope that's got 100 minutes of travel, which is not uncommon, that's not 100 minutes from zero. That's 100 minutes all up. So if you put that scope on, it's going to be approximately ballpark of 50 MOA up and 50 MOA down. Now you go 5 MOA either side to zero that thing, but so the 20 offsets that. So you're still 30 MOA from the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
With my sort of competition gun, I've got a 40 something MOA spur mount.
Yep.
On that, and I do notice like the tiniest little bit of loss of clarity. If I dial it up even 2 or 3 mils, it is fractionally fractionally clearer.
Okay. Yeah, but you're probably 40 MI. You're probably pushing it right down towards.
I'm trying to
towards the bottom.
You know,
Yeah.
I want to get as much
Yeah.
usable elevation because I can shoot that rifle out to the
How often would you shoot 100 meters in a comp?
pretty rare unless Paul's the match director.
Getting hammered tonight. Well, guys, that's unless there's anything particular, that's section 1 done, which is really the what it all means, and hopefully we've clarified a few terms for you and bits and pieces. But all that information is pretty incomplete without. Well, what do you do with that? How do you apply that to your scenario and deciding which scope to buy? So we shall be back in the next episode for that. And anyway, we'll get out of here quickly so we can press record again and do it again. All right. Cheers for listening.
Yeet.
Thanks for listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast. To continue the discussion, check out our Facebook page. And for more information, head to our website, www.precisionshootingpodcast.com.au. This episode was brought to you by Impact Dynamics.